Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the place where we take a stack of dense, sometimes utterly bizarre source material articles, research, high-level intelligence, and we extract the most important nuggets of knowledge or insight.
And we give you the distilled truth, fast, fascinating, and fully informed.
Today, we are not just analyzing a disaster. We are really analyzing a paradox.
We're strapping in for Mach 2 and completely defying the conventional laws of aerodynamics and stability. We're moving straight into the laws of temporal mechanics.
That's right. The sources we received detail an incident that, if confirmed by conventional physics, would force us to rewrite, well, every textbook on aviation and possibly cosmology. We're talking about the inexplicable disappearance of a supersonic airliner, British Airways Flight 192, over the Atlantic. And crucially, this is not a story about a crash or an engine failure or even, terrestrial foul play.
No, this is about a plane that, in every sense of the word, simply ceased to exist in our conventional space-time.
Right. So our deep dive today focuses on the investigation into Flight 192, which was registered as Concorde Golf Victor Foxtrot.
And we have to follow two completely contradictory narratives, really, at the same time. The first documents the initial, baffled and profoundly terrestrial response from air traffic control and the official intelligence apparatus.
Okay.
But then the narrative just takes a sharp, immediate turn. It introduces extraordinary, high-level intelligence that points not to structural failure, but to a radical, galaxy-spanning temporal anomaly.
And our mission today is to follow that radical trail. We're going from the sterile and procedural logs of air traffic control straight into galactic-level conflicts and, frankly, the ancient feud between two cosmic entities.
We have to. We've got to address the specific mechanics of the disappearance, the truly bizarre technology used to track the anomaly, including the unsanctioned use of an antique wooden police box.
Right, the police box.
The terrifying psychological warfare that was deployed against the crews, and ultimately the identity and, the motivations of the powerful intelligence behind this whole vanishing act.
So you should prepare yourselves. This deep dive requires an analysis of concepts far outside our terrestrial norms.
Way outside. We're talking about time travel used not as some theoretical possibility, but as a massive, tangible navigational hazard.
And psychokinesis leveraged not as a parlor trick, but as an industrial energy source capable of creating living guards.
And, of course, the surprising vulnerability of even the most technologically sophisticated aircraft Concorde to an attack that is entirely non-physical.
We're going to connect the dots between an inter-universal Time Lord feud and a routine flight plan over the Cornish coast.
We want you to leave this deep dive understanding the physics of a time warp and the psychology of a mass illusion.
Okay, let's start with the hard, verifiable facts documented in the ATC logs, before everything went completely sideways.
The setting for this event was utterly routine, but the parameters were absolutely critical for what happened next.
So where are we?
The location was high above the Atlantic, 57,000 feet, which is, it's approaching the borders of space. It's a height where Captain Urker of Flight 192 could actually see the curvature of the Earth from the flight deck.
Wow.
And they were hurtling towards London at over 1,300 miles per hour, or precisely Mach 1.6. It's so important to remember that speed is the critical factor here.
Right. Concorde wasn't just fast.
No, it lived on the very edge of established physics.
And as the captain announced over the intercom, the journey was nearing its end. They were initiating that critical deceleration phase, preparing for descent into London Heathrow.
And this phase is intense. The three-person flight crew, captain, first officer, and flight engineer, they needed to calculate this perfectly to slow the aircraft until it was just subsonic at the exact moment of crossing the British coast.
And the sources say they were spot on their timing, which just shows you the level of professional rigor we're dealing with.
Exactly. And that procedural rigor is what makes the air traffic control logs so chilling to read. The aircraft was communicating perfectly with the ground.
So everything's normal.
Completely. ATC gave the initial clearance. Speedbird Concorde 192, you are cleared to descend to flight level 370, the crew acknowledged. They were then cleared to continue descent to 280, all normal.
And that's when the conversation died, right?
That's it. The controller asked for acknowledgement of the descent clearance, and instead of a clear voice, they just got this confused crescendo of atmospherics, a whistling, buzzing interference in their headphones.
So just static.
More than static. The controller thought they detected, like, a sliver of the captain's voice underneath it all for a moment, but then Just total eerie silence.
And what happened on the radar screen is the key piece of evidence here, the thing that disproves any conventional theory of catastrophic structural failure.
Right. The illuminated call sign and the blip marking Concorde's progress. It didn't crash into the sea, which would have left some kind of residual signal echo, nor did it just suddenly vanish due to an equipment malfunction.
Yes, so what did it do?
The source states the shimmering image grew fainter and fainter, then it faded altogether from the screen. It was a gradual dematerialization.
So it just dissolved.
It dissolved.
Yeah.
The aircraft had simply disappeared without debris, without warning, without a distress signal. It prompted the controller to raise the full emergency flag because this disappearance defied every single rational explanation in the flight safety manual.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. The plane didn't crash, it dissolved into space. This mandates a total shift in thinking, doesn't it?
It has to. If 100 tons of supersonic aircraft vanishes without any evidence of deceleration or disintegration, you are absolutely not dealing with mechanics or explosives anymore.
You're dealing with something entirely.
You're dealing with physics far beyond our current understanding, or, frankly, our current dimension. And what's truly fascinating is that the initial disappearance looks exactly like the dematerialization of an advanced temporal vehicle.
Which, of course, brings us to the next, entirely unconnected yet perfectly simultaneous incident.
The universe, it seems, has a dark sense of humor about coincidences.
Speaking of temporal vehicles, at the exact moment Golf Victor Foxtrot was dissolving over the Atlantic, a vehicle of quite another kind, and certainly of another time, was nearing London.
The TARDIS.
The TARDIS.
This was meant to be a simple, routine trip to 1851 London for the Doctor, Tegan, and Nyssa. However, the journey went south immediately. They weren't just experiencing severe turbulence. The TARDIS control room began to shake and shudder violently.
Tegan, who, had real-world experience as a flight attendant, she likened it to the worst air turbulence she'd ever encountered.
But the Doctor instantly recognized a much more serious cosmic problem. He diagnosed it as feedback from the zonal comparator, which progressed rapidly into the TARDIS, oscillating like a giant tuning fork.
So the zonal comparator, what exactly is that?
It's a crucial piece of jargon we have to define. It essentially processes local space-time conditions. It's like a temporal GPS and stabilizer all rolled into one.
So when it feeds back,
it means the entire surrounding continuum is actively hostile. The Doctor realized they were caught in the massive wash of another time vehicle, or maybe the wake of a massive temporal shift. Evasive maneuvers were critical.
The interference was that severe.
He feared it would destroy the TARDIS itself if they didn't materialize immediately.
And this leads directly to the impossible coincidence. The TARDIS was forcibly ejected from this time wash and materializes near Heathrow.
At the exact time Flight 192 vanished. The Doctor and his companions, Nyssa in particular, they realized this had to be cross-tracing on the time-space axis.
Meaning they got caught in the wake of whatever took the Concorde.
Precisely. They'd been caught in the gravitational or temporal disturbance left by whatever force had yanked the Concorde out of reality.
And this immediately allowed the Doctor to formulate his time contour theory.
Yes. He concluded that the missing Concorde was not a question of where it went, but definitively when it went. It had flown straight into an exponential time contour, or a time warp.
Which he described as what?
As a massive, dangerous navigational hazard that existed deep within the galaxy. The source material really emphasizes the Doctor's sheer frustration that this enormous volatile structure was just hanging around in the vicinity of Earth. He argued you can't have a navigational hazard like that hanging about the galaxy.
That's an incredible conclusion. A supersonic jet designed to break the conventional sound barrier was inadvertently fast enough at that specific altitude to break the temporal barrier and get sucked into a deep space-time hazard.
That's a vulnerability I can guarantee British Airways never listed in their pre-flight checks.
I would imagine not. And this brings us to the immediate and, let's be honest, utterly absurd optics of the Doctor's arrival.
Right. The TARDIS, having been violently ejected from the time wash, it briefly appeared on radar near the approach to runway 28 left.
And
then it materialized, unauthorized, out of date, and completely out of place in Terminal 1's departure lounge.
So you have to imagine the scene, right? A national emergency is underway, a supersonic jet is missing, military protocols are kicking in.
And in the middle of all this chaos, an old wooden police box just appears out of thin air.
which leads to the ice-cold inquiry from the terminal duty officer, Andrews, as the doctor is just, casually reading the Times.
Complaining about English cricket scores, yes.
Yeah.
He was instantly surrounded by police and security.
The doctor had to pull off a brilliant piece of improvisational diplomacy here.
He did. He immediately dropped the code word unit, referring to that highly secretive special security organization tasked with handling non-terrestrial threats.
And then he name-dropped Sir John Sudbury, the head of unit, and Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart.
And that name-dropping was enough. It instantly transformed him from some suspicious figure in a pompous man in the brown uniform to a potentially valuable, if eccentric, agent in the eyes of the lower security staff.
But let's pause and consider the risk here. Airport controller Douglas Sherd was focused on 30 million pounds of missing aircraft and hundreds of passengers. The idea of being mandated to brief a doctor with a police box seemed completely insane to him.
The sources say he was sputtering into the telephone, calling it a madcap scheme and expressing, vigorous skepticism. You can see the deep institutional resistance to dealing with something that looks so utterly ridiculous, yet claims such high authority.
But this is where we see the power of the larger narrative at play, isn't it?
Absolutely. Sir John Sudbury, the head of unit, he overrides all of Sherd's logical objections. Sudbury had a history with the doctor. He knew that when an inexplicable vanishing occurs, the doctor is the only resource capable of providing answers.
He called it the most amazing piece of good luck.
He did, recognizing that only a Time Lord could diagnose a temporal issue.
So, despite all common sense, the owner of a ship that travels anywhere in time and space is now granted full operational clearance in the heart of London Heathrow.
The scale of the disaster, the sheer impossibility of the vanishing, was so profoundly terrifying that the bureaucracy was forced to defer to a Time Lord operating out of an obsolete piece of street furniture. It's a perfect example of how cosmic events can shatter terrestrial institutional resistance.
Okay, so with his authority now, let's say, begrudgingly established, the doctor's next step was, it was perhaps the most audacious move yet.
Deliberately repeating the disaster to observe the mechanism, he instructed airport controller Sherd to send up a second Concorde, Golf Alpha Charlie, captained by the skeptical but very capable Stapley, to follow the exact same route, height, and Mach 1.6 speed as Flight 192.
And this is where the logistics get wonderfully absurd. The second supersonic test flight included one crucial addition.
The doctor's monitoring equipment.
Which was the TARDIS itself.
We have this incredible image from the sources of the TARDIS being loaded onto a forklift truck and being maneuvered sideways into the Concorde's cargo hold.
The practical reality of forklifting a multidimensional time machine into the pinnacle of modern aviation. It's just a beautiful meeting of high sci-fi and mundane ground operations.
It is. And the crew, Captain Stapley, First Officer Andrew Bilton, and Flight Engineer Roger Scobie, they were naturally bewildered.
I bet.
Scobie joked that if they followed the same course, they'd end up somewhere over the rainbow. The doctor had to gravely remind them they had the TARDIS on board, to which Stapley, highly focused on his instruments, just responded with this dry skepticism. You mean that police box?
So they took off, a beautiful, fragile creature of the upper air, soaring towards the borders of space and time. But as Alpha Charlie reached the deceleration point off the Cornish coast,
the doctor's worst fears and his hypothesis were confirmed. The exact event of the first flight was replicated.
the whistling interference returned.
Yes. Air traffic control watched in horror as Captain Stapley's voice was submerged in the same unearthly noise. The blip on their radar flickered, grew fainter, and vanished altogether.
A second vanishing.
And that second vanishing confirmed definitively that this wasn't random. It was a function of speed and coordinates.
But the experience inside the Concorde for the crew was immediate and terrifying. As the aircraft hit the contour, Nyssa, who was watching the TARDIS dials in the cargo hold,
She confirmed the analysis. She yelled, "Concorde has just flown into the time contour."
and up on the flight deck, the only immediate physical sign was the radiation meter.
Right, it was flickering wildly in the alert section. Captain Stapley, always the grounded professional, assumed a simple solar flare.
But the doctor knew better.
He did. He corrected him, explaining they were reading galactic radiation through which we're passing. Meaning they weren't just displaced spatially, they were traversing centuries, or maybe even millennia, in a temporal sense.
They lost all radio contact.
Completely. The doctor estimated it was the spatial equivalent of being 400 billion miles from air traffic control.
And then, unbelievably, the flight deck received descent clearance. They had seemingly made a completely normal approach and landing.
With familiar sights, a Pan Am jet nearby, and crucially, the familiar smell of kerosene outside the cabin. The crew believed they were back at Heathrow.
They must have been so relieved.
They were, thinking that the doctor's time warp nonsense had proved to be wrong. But the doctor was anything but relieved. He was acutely embarrassed and profoundly unsettled.
Because he knew.
He knew they had no right to be back at Heathrow. He deduced instantly that the entire experience of the return journey and landing had been fundamentally unreal, a construct of the mind designed to placate the crew and keep them unaware of their true predicament.
And this brings us to the core mechanism of the threat and one of the most intellectually fascinating elements of the sources, perceptual induction.
Right. And this isn't just hypnotism. This is mass, shared, cross-sensory illusion created by an external entity.
And that diagnosis was cemented when Nyssa experienced a terrifying moment of clairvoyance upon landing.
Yes. She saw the airport not as reality, but as a distorted reflection in a window. And beyond that glass, she saw a frightening vortex filled with bodies, cadaverous shapes, putrid, rotting, utterly horrible.
That fleeting glimpse of the truth pierced the illusion for a moment.
It did. And that glimpse allowed the doctor to make the final, crucial diagnosis. They were under the influence of perceptual induction, a form of incredibly powerful psychokinesis generating a mass hallucination shared across multiple intelligent subjects.
The sheer technical sophistication of this illusion is what we need to dwell on. It didn't just fool their eyes, it fooled every single sense.
Exactly. Think about the detail required. For the pilots to believe they made a perfect touchdown, the illusion had to simulate the feel of the landing gear thudding onto the tarmac, the sight of the runway markings, and yes, the smell of kerosene and jet exhaust.
It wasn't just suggestion.
No, this was the creation of a unified virtual reality imposed psychically on everyone aboard. The illusion was total. It was real enough to fool sophisticated pilots and trained scientists.
So how do you break a mass multisensory illusion generated by a powerful unseen force?
Well, the doctor realized he couldn't use technology. He had to use pure, concerted, rational human effort.
He demanded that the crew shift their mental focus outward, forcing them to question the reality they were experiencing. He yelled, "Concentrate, look at everything, observe it in every detail."
And this action, this group effort, in intense, focused skepticism, it worked. It successfully broke the spell.
What happened?
As they focused ruthlessly on the perceived reality, the temperature dropped, a moaning wind blew up, and the world began to ripple. Tegan, staring at a Pan Am jumbo jet right outside the window, watched it twist like a mirage and then start to dissolve.
And the ultimate reveal is just stunning.
Layer upon layer of what they had taken to be Heathrow peeled away. The air screamed, the airport ripped apart as if it had been nothing but a painted cloth, and then there was darkness.
Giving way to a cold, empty, primordial tract of land. The illusion, the ultimate shared sensory experience, was abruptly over.
The complexity of perceptual induction lies in its mastery of all five senses. The crew had literally been flying under hypnosis.
Okay, so once the chilling illusion was broken, the crew found themselves in a landscape that was cold, empty, and utterly alien.
The doctor quickly identified the location as definitely Jurassic, possibly near the Pleistocene era, due to the sudden onset of cold placing them approximately 140 million years backwards down the time contour.
140 million years. That's an astonishing temporal detour. And they suddenly face the true physical reality of their perfect landing.
Right. They followed the long ribbon of tire tracks and realized that their memory of a gentle touchdown was pure fabrication. They had unknowingly crash-landed 100 tons of supersonic aircraft onto what was luckily a dried-out mudflat.
And the doctor explained their perfect trauma-free memory by saying it was like having a tooth out under hypnosis.
They didn't feel a thing while under the spell. This just highlights the insidious nature of perceptual induction. It not only creates reality, it manages the consequences of actions taken within that reality, erasing the trauma of the physical impact.
Which means Captain Urquhart and the first crew must have experienced the exact same illusion when they crashed.
Stands to reason. But at least they weren't alone. Concorde Golf Victor Foxtrot, the first missing aircraft, was found nearby. It looked like a prehistoric animal entirely at home in this pristine landscape.
And dominating the horizon was the unmistakable citadel. A massive pyramid of dark stone, megalithic, and clearly artificial.
No creature, certainly no human, of this era could have constructed it. They also discovered the skeletal remains of a massive spaceship in a nearby crater. which the doctor quickly identified as the possible initial reason for the temporal distortion.
So a prior event.
It suggested a prior catastrophic high-level technological event had occurred here, creating the temporal hazard that the Concorde later flew into.
And behind the mystery of the Citadel and the time contour was the Conjurer, introduced to the crew as the monstrous figure of Khalid.
And the description in the sources is graphic. A yellow oriental face, bloated like the body of a drowned dog and gangrenous with age and excess. He practiced his so-called magic arts in the Citadel using a great crystal ball.
But this sorcerer persona was purely manipulative, wasn't it? A layer of deception masking advanced technology.
Completely. Khalid used strange, nonsensical chanting, Shiraz, Shiraz, Tumul Bulur, and so on, to reinforce the perceived reality and the passenger's compliant state.
And the sources reveal that the captured Flight 192 passengers were blind to the alien landscape, forced into hard labor, mindlessly chiseling at the Citadel walls, all while they daydreamed normality.
And this is key. He didn't just render them unconscious, he maintained the illusion of normality so they would willingly perform hard labor. For instance, the crew of the first flight, Captain Urquhart's team, they believed they were simply on a New York stopover, waiting to hit the bars.
So they were happily fulfilling his labor requirements while their minds were completely elsewhere.
Precisely. But the master's most tangible and terrifying tools were the Plasmatons.
These creatures were horrifying to encounter, appearing as a great tongue of white fire or hideously bland, seething conglomerates, formless yet powerful.
The doctor provided the crucial scientific explanation, grounding the psychic horror in theoretical physics. He defined them as protein agglomeration, meaning they were random particles assembled from the atmosphere via psychokinesis.
So this is where the depth lies. He wasn't just influencing minds. He was using concentrated psychic energy to physically restructure ambient matter into living, albeit temporary, beings.
He defined them as quite inanimate, but animated entirely by powerful, focused psychic energy. They served as his guards, his laborers, and his collection agents.
Tactically, it's genius.
It is. They're expendable, self-replenishing, and powered by the energy harvested from the Zerafin, the very source he was trying to steal. They are the physical manifestation of stolen mental power.
And we see their terrifying function when First Officer Bilton and Flight Engineer Scobie attempt to help the hallucinating passengers.
Yes. The 7 Plasmatons merged together, becoming this massive, unified globule of trembling matter. Bilton and Scobie were instantly engorged and disappeared like solids being dissolved and digested in a physical yet non-organic gut.
It shows that plasmatons aren't just energy beings. They can physically absorb and dematerialize organic matter.
Luckily, not all the passengers of Flight 192 were completely subdued by the mass hallucination. The second crew encountered Professor Hayter, a specialist in hypnosis from the University of Darlington.
And his presence provided the first terrestrial insight into resisting the master's power.
Hayter explained that he had resisted the illusions by using contra-suggest, a technique where you actively affirm the opposite of what your senses tell you. He was keenly aware he was facing a powerful hallucinogenic force, which he suspected was using ultrasonics or something similar.
He had a scientific description for it.
Hyperstimulation of eidetic images, which is crucial. It suggests the master wasn't inventing reality from scratch, but amplifying and manipulating the subject's existing memories and expectations, like the memory of a normal approach into Heathrow.
So Hayter's presence confirmed the doctor's theory that focused, rational effort could break the spell.
Exactly. But a far stranger form of resistance emerged through Nyssa. As they approached the Citadel, Nyssa, being sensitive to the sheer psychic forces at work, suddenly acted as a medium.
Her voice changed.
It became deep and resonant, clearly not her own. She warned the doctor, do not approach the Citadel.
So this was the first proof of a significant benevolent intelligence operating nearby, actively resisting Khalid's control.
Right, and Khalid retaliated instantly from his remote chamber. Seeing this communication in his great crystal ball, he deployed a plasmaton cloud, a bioplasmic shield, enveloping Nyssa to silence her.
And the doctor deduced an important tactical weakness here.
He did. The power source for the plasmatons must be limited. Diverting energy to protect and silence Nyssa meant less psychic energy was available for guards and labor elsewhere, confirming they were dealing with a finite, harvested power source.
Okay, so the doctor followed the tracks left by his own TARDIS and entered Khalid's chamber.
And inside, he saw the ultimate expression of the master's cruelty. Forced, mindless labor. The hallucinating passengers and crew were mindlessly chiseling away at the tight mesh of stones forming the rotunda, the inner circular room.
Building the mechanism for their own doom.
Exactly. And during the confrontation, the doctor was instantly skeptical of Khalid's whole sorcerer act. He knew there was something mechanistic about his power, suggesting technology, not magic, was the true foundation.
But Khalid kept up the act.
Oh yeah. Maintaining the illusion of a deity, he continued to boast of ruling his domain through magic arts and the power of the Great One, claiming he intended to scourge the entirety of time and space with the Doctor's captured TARDIS.
Classic misdirection, using myth to mask advanced high-level physics.
Perfect misdirection. And the moment of truth came when Professor Hayter, the only person there with the scientific rigor to ignore the spectacle, found Khalid's talk of bioenergetic powers and intellectual garbage just beneath contempt.
So he started dismantling the pedestal beneath Khalid's crystal.
Determined to expose the sorcerer as a fraud by revealing circuit boards and electronics. And he succeeded. He pulled out modules and circuit boards, proving the mechanical nature of the sorcery.
But the triumph was short-lived.
Very. As the doctor stared, nonplussed at the components, something stirred inside Khalid's voluminous robes. The flesh of Khalid liquefied, revealing a dark and ominously familiar figure that tore itself free. It was the Master.
And he gloated that the Doctor never understood how thoroughly he utilized deception.
So Khalid wasn't just a disguise. He was essentially an advanced puppet, a high-level plasmaton animated by the Master's psychic force and sustained by the energy from the Citadel. It was a perfect piece of psychological warfare.
So once he's unmasked, the Master immediately admits his predicament, which explains this whole drastic scheme.
Yes. He had escaped a previous peril on Castrovalva, but was stranded here. And he had a vital mechanical reason for needing the Doctor's TARDIS components. His own TARDIS was not fully functional. It had run out of power.
Specifically, he needed a substitute for his dynamorphic generator.
Right, and this is a crucial piece of Time Lord jargon. The dynamorphic generator is the heart of a TARDIS. It's the highly specialized reactor that powers dimensional transcendentalism, the ability to be bigger on the inside and temporal displacement. Without it, the TARDIS is just a fancy box.
So he was desperate. And he'd found a perfect, horrifying, living power source.
Which they discovered after breaking through the rotunda wall. The Doctor, Tegan, and Nyssa found the sanctum, the engine room of the whole operation. In the center lay a large, open sarcophagus containing a great cerebellum that glowed and trembled.
An immeasurable intelligence at the center of a psychic vortex.
And this glowing brain was revealed to be the Zerafin. They were chronicled as the most highly developed beings in the universe, whose home planet Zerafes was devastated by a colossal, self-inflicted war.
And to survive the radiation poisoning, they'd performed this incredible collective feat.
They had physically amalgamated into one organism with one massive personality to rest, heal, and regenerate away from the ravaged surface of their world.
But the Doctor found horrifying evidence of the Master's activities within the sanctum.
He did. He saw small, petrified homuncular victims of the Master's tissue compression eliminator. This device, his preferred weapon, instantly reduces living tissue to small, petrified statues.
And these were the Zerafin who had been first reborn.
Yes, during an attempt to regenerate, only to be eliminated by the Master to prevent them from interfering with his plans to steal their core energy.
So the Doctor realized why the psychic forces were so contradictory, sometimes helping them, like with Nyssa's premonition, and sometimes hindering them.
Exactly. The immense Zerafin personality was suffering from a schismatic effect due to the Master's influence. This caused the entity to split into distinct good Anathon and evil Zarak sides.
It's like a Jekyll and Hyde coexistence of their ego and id.
That's a perfect way to put it. Anathon later called it the division of their baseness and their noble side. The Master, being a conduit of pure, malicious chaos, was able to leverage Zarak, the Zeram's negative and destructive aspect, to destabilize the whole.
Harnessing the darkest parts of this collective consciousness as his battery.
The Master wasn't just stealing energy, he was poisoning a god.
And this overwhelming, vibrating psychic vortex drove one man to a truly tragic end, Professor Hayter.
Yes, a man of immense scientific rigor, but the prospect of having his entire logical worldview overturned by the existence of this entity. It led him to reject the Doctor's urgent warning.
Driven by insatiable, almost suicidal curiosity.
He knelt before the sarcophagus, declaring, "I am a scientist. The chance of inheriting the wisdom of the universe is an opportunity I cannot ignore." He sought to absorb the Zerafin's infinite knowledge directly.
And the outcome was instantaneous and horrific.
He convulsed in agony and ecstasy, dying instantly. His entire body was reduced to a shimmering cloud of particles that were immediately absorbed by the Zaraphin nucleus. It was the ultimate fatal cost of unmediated knowledge.
His mind was just overloaded.
Completely. Flooded by the totality of the universe's data, leading to a complete molecular overload.
However, Hayter's demise served one critical final purpose.
It did. The white Zaraphin, Anathon, the noble aspect, temporarily materialized from Hayter's molecular residue, now combined with Hayter's human experience, to warn the Doctor.
And Anathon confirmed that the Master was harnessing the Zaraphin's energy as a substitute for his defunct dynormorphic generator.
And immediately Zarak, the Master's side of the personality, countered Anathon, articulating the Master's grand ambition to become a temporal divinity and scourge the entirety of time and space.
So the Doctor, Tegan, and Nyssa had to join hands and mentally restrain Zarak,
attempting to prevent him from summoning other evil Zaraphin personalities that would fully turn the tide. But despite their psychic efforts, the Master won the physical race.
He perfected his induction loop around the rotunda.
And with a grinding sound, the sarcophagus dematerialized instantly, successfully transferring the entire Zaraphin nucleus to the Master's waiting TARDIS.
The Doctor was left abject with despair, believing the Master had finally achieved unstoppable power.
But despite the seemingly hopeless situation in the sanctum, the action shifted immediately to the Master's ship. The Master, rushing to activate his system, still needed the Doctor's TARDIS components to make his newly stolen power source fully functional.
Which provided a small window of opportunity.
Captain Stapley and First Officer Bilton, who had been hiding from the Master's rampage, they accessed the Doctor's TARDIS, which the Master had abandoned nearby, and locked themselves in the control room.
They didn't know how to fly it, but Stapley immediately recognized the situation.
He knew the Master needed those parts.
Yeah.
So in a moment of sheer bravado and a pilot's intuition, a knack for complex systems, Stapley committed brilliant sabotage.
He didn't understand the physics, but he understood component integration.
Exactly. He recklessly removed modules from the console and replaced them in a random order, hoping to put a spanner in the sophisticated workings of the Master's temporal flight controls.
So he just made the TARDIS unusable for the Master's scheme.
Right. And the Master, finding the Doctor's TARDIS unresponsive, abandoned it and focused on his own now-powered ship. But immediately, the Doctor's TARDIS began to function on its own, piloting itself perfectly back to the sanctum.
And the explanation for that was Hayter.
A telepathic projection of the recently absorbed Professor Hayter, who had merged with the Zaraphin life force. This confirms that the benevolent Zaraphin, now infused with Hayter's unique expertise, were fighting back from within the vortex.
Meanwhile, the Master was ready for launch, and we learn what happened to the passengers of the original Flight 192.
He had condensed the 9 individuals, plus Captain Urquhart's crew, via molecular disintegration into a neat little store of protoplasm for his own potential use.
Just a highly portable, disgusting form of organelle spare parts.
Pretty much. The Master then deployed his TARDIS's chameleon circuit.
Which is the feature that allows it to change shape to blend in.
Exactly. He materialized his ship around the other Concorde Flight 192, the real damaged jet, and disguised his time machine as a perfect replica of the supersonic jet, a chilling mockery.
And he attempted to use his stolen Zaraphin power to take off.
But Stapley's random component swap, his accidental yet brilliant sabotage, it worked perfectly. The Master's TARDIS vanished, but reappeared close by, stuck.
And the Master was forced to come out and accuse the Doctor.
Fuming, yes. Your substitution of the time-lapse compressor for the temporal limiter.
And this detail is priceless. It defines the power of Stapley's instinct. The temporal limiter controls deceleration and safe navigation through time.
And the quantum accelerator is related to speed and positioning. Stapley, replacing the limiter with the compressor, a component that stabilizes temporal fields, effectively short-circuited the Master's ability to escape.
So the Master, having stolen near-infinite energy, was stuck in the prehistoric mud with a dysfunctional TARDIS because a jet pilot swapped 2 chips.
It's incredible. And now the Doctor finally had leverage. The Master needed that temporal limiter back to escape the contour.
So he initiated a negotiation for a component trade.
A clean deal. The Master would free the passengers, reversing the molecular compression, and the Doctor would exchange the correctly programmed temporal limiter for the quantum accelerator.
And the Master, desperate to escape, agreed. He opened his now Corinthian pillar TARDIS.
Another costume change, showing the circuit was still unstable.
And the 9 passengers and crew emerged, safe but deeply confused. And the doctor and master made the wary, high-stakes exchange.
But the doctor's final twist came immediately after the trade. He revealed to Nissa that while the temporal limiter he gave the master would work, he had installed an inhibition factor inherent in the programming.
A delayed action temporal trap.
Designed to ensure the doctor's TARDIS would arrive back in Earth's time zone first, giving him control over the outcome.
Meanwhile, the actual physical Concorde, Alpha Charlie, had to get airborne under impossible circumstances.
Stranded 140 million years in the past. They cannibalized parts from the real damaged Flight 192, and Captain Stapley executed an ingenious, desperate lash-up to start the high-tech engines using compressed air.
And Tegan, on the ground, played a vital role, manually releasing the compressed air from the wheels of the decommissioned jet to provide the necessary boost.
The technical difficulty was enormous. A fractured brake line, a frozen mud-flat runway, and extreme buffeting during the low-speed run.
Yet Captain Stapley executed the impossible takeoff, reaching V1 and V2 on the primitive ground. The sheer resilience of the aircraft and the skill of the human pilot
prompted his jubilant shout to the doctor, "Finest plane in the world."
So once airborne, the doctor entered the TARDIS controls, which were still in Alpha Charlie's hold.
And he programmed the TARDIS coordinates to reverse the time contour, effectively kicking Concorde back on its original flight path in time.
And the result was instantaneous. Alpha Charlie instantly recovered radio navigation, and air traffic control acknowledged them. The outside world believed they had only been missing for 10 minutes.
Just 10 minutes. The precise time window between the first plane vanishing and the test plane being lost.
And the crew, having experienced 140 million years of history and a fight against a cosmic entity, insisted vehemently that they had been away 300 million years.
Airport controller Sherd was left speechless by their flippancy, unable to reconcile the logs with the crew's claims.
And as for the master, his defeat was swift and, in a cosmic sense, quite poetic.
The Master's Corinthian column TARDIS appeared briefly in the sky over Heathrow, a shining column seen by the bewildered police constables. But the doctor's programmed inhibition factor and the temporal limiter worked.
It knocked the master back into time-space
And forced his TARDIS to materialize on his original home planet, Zeriphus.
The doctor was precise in his temporal aim. Zeriphus had been devastated by radiation millions of years ago, but by now the atmosphere would be clearing.
But he predicted it would not be a nice climate for the Master, who, having exhausted his own power source, lost the Zerifan nucleus, and now possessed a sabotaged, malfunctioning TARDIS, was stranded on a deserted, hostile world where he could do no immediate harm.
So the threat was neutralized, all thanks to a pilot's intuition and a random component swap.
What an impossible flight.
It really was. Let's review the sheer complexity of the events that occurred during those terrifying 10 missing minutes. A missing supersonic jet was merely proof of a massive temporal anomaly utilized by a master manipulator, the Master,
who deployed sophisticated psychokinetic illusion, that perceptual induction, and used Plasmatons matter created by sheer will to harvest a composite alien consciousness, the Zerifan, for power.
And the key to this entire scheme was the Zerifan intelligence, which highlights a profound truth about power, doesn't it? Whether it's intellectual or psychic, it's only valuable when it's unified.
Right. The sources demonstrate that the Master succeeded in exploiting the Zerifan's baseness, the evil aspect known as Zarak, to subvert the whole. It was a classic large-scale demonstration of how external malignancy can destabilize even the most highly developed beings by leveraging their inherent duality.
The constant battle between the good and the bad, the noble ego and the destructive id, within any enormous concentrated energy source.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner? Here are the key takeaways from this deep dive into temporal mechanics and psychic warfare.
First, the sheer speed and altitude of Concorde made it uniquely susceptible to temporal hazards. That razor's edge of Mach 2, which was a point of pride for 20th century engineering, was just fast enough to graze a galactic navigational hazard.
Proving that pushing the boundaries of spatial speed can inadvertently push the boundaries of time.
Second, psychic energy, when concentrated and harvested, can manifest physically, as we saw with the Plasmatons, and create shared multisensory experiences through perceptual induction.
However, the sources confirm that concerted, focused, rational effort, like Professor Hayter's contrasuggestion and the crew's collective concentration, can successfully break the most powerful of illusions.
The power of shared reality and focus is a formidable weapon against mental manipulation.
And finally, a highly advanced time machine like the TARDIS, possessing dimensional transcendentalism and a powerful dynormorphic generator, is vulnerable to the most common form of attack: accidental yet brilliant human sabotage.
Captain Staffley proved that complex, non-terrestrial technology can be disabled by a random substitution of components like the temporal limiter and quantum accelerator, because ultimately physics, even Time Lord physics, requires functional parts to perform functional roles.
That brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over. The source material suggests that Captain Stapley and Bilton, having successfully navigated and operated the Doctor's TARDIS, even accidentally flying it perfectly back to the sanctum guided by Hayter's projection.
They possess an innate, almost impossible knack for coordinates and temporal control.
So, if the specialized skills of a supersonic jet pilot translate so perfectly into an instinctive mastery of Type 40 time capsule controls,
What future implications does that hold for mankind's eventual temporal travel capabilities? Perhaps the greatest time travelers won't be pure scientists or mathematicians, but highly skilled pilots whose ingrained understanding of velocity, navigation, and trajectory gives them a fundamental edge in mapping the time-space vortex itself.
something profound to think about next time you're stuck in a holding pattern waiting for descent clearance. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.